Greetings Acolytes, Ghost here, this time finally talking about the alpha release of Dark Heresy, and I'm going to explain to you why it's not just Rogue Trader 2. I'm still a little sick, you can probably tell from my voice. Anyway, if you're unaware, Dark Heresy is the next Owlcat Games CRPG set in the Warhammer 40k universe. I've dedicated a lot of this channel to the previous work, Rogue Trader, and I was a little sad I couldn't jump on the game during its early development stages. I feel like I missed something. So now that I am more, let's say, dedicated to these kind of things, I jumped at the opportunity, and I'm going to cover Dark Heresy extensively. To me, it's the perfect mix of two things. A CRPG, a form of RPG that I really like due to its expansiveness, choice and consequences, and the Warhammer 40k setting, a franchise with a lore that's 50 years old, and that I discovered when I was a kid playing StarQuest. So for me, it's like a perfect storm. Now, to the meat of the matter. The Dark Heresy video game is based on the tabletop RPG with the same name, specifically its first edition, and it tries to adapt many of its core features into the video game medium. For instance, your character is an Inquisition acolyte with a group of specialists at their side, and their role is to investigate cases for the organization and solve them. How you solve them, and whether you're doing correctly, passing judgment on the real culprit or not, it's entirely up to you. And I have to say, those cases, or at least the two we have to investigate in the alpha, are not easy at all to figure out, at least for me. The core difference between Dark Heresy and Rogue Trader is its investigation system. It revolves around your inquisitorial journal, a sort of technological evidence board that includes all the clues and conclusions you may draw on a case. Every time you talk to someone who has something to say about the case at hand, or you find a clue in the environment you're investigating, it will be registered there. In the bigger areas, you'll find beacons that let you change your party composition. This can be useful not only for combat, but also because companions chime in and lend their expertise when you're analyzing evidence in the inquisitorial journal. I really like this part because it opens up the idea that, depending on what you're investigating, you should choose the best companions for the job. You can move all these clues around on the board to organize them as you see fit, and you can also draw conclusions that can later be changed or disputed. Some evidence gathered during the investigation will conflict with certain proposed conclusions, and the inquisitorial journal will mark them as such. The conclusions are not final. You can modify them as you proceed with an investigation. What is final is the report you're going to send to the Inquisition, which in theory will lead to consequences for NPCs, areas, and potentially yourself as the investigator. I say in theory because this may well be further down the line. I haven't seen any consequence yet in the playable alpha I experienced, since I tried my best to correctly solve the cases, gathering as much evidence as I could and solving the cases only at the end of the playable part. This led to a lot of running around the same areas, looking again in the same places and talking again to the same people to see if there were new clues to be found or new dialogue lines based on evidence I recently discovered. And there were. Essentially, you won't discover some clues if you don't know what to ask or where to look, even if you examine a specific place before. This is my only real concern about the game. It's designed this way by intent, mimicking real detective work, where you constantly revisit the same crime scenes and interview the same people over and over again. I feel some players will not consider it fun, but will instead see it as a form of backtracking through the same areas again and again. We'll see. Speaking of areas, true to its tabletop origins, in Dark Heresy we're in the Calixis sector, a small piece of the Imperium deep into the Segmentum Obscurus, on the northern edge of the galaxy. It's still unknown if we're going to travel much in the final release of the game, but in the alpha we're on Scintilla, the sector's capital world. It's a hive world, and we're going to delve into the lower levels of Hive Sibelius Underhive. Seeing the footage here, you might think this game is a one-to-one transposition of Rogue Trader, set in another part of the Imperium with a new story and characters, with the investigation system replacing the colony system, but you'd be mostly wrong. Besides some major graphical upgrades that are already apparent in the alpha and a different UI, both the leveling and combat systems have been completely reworked. Dark Heresy plays in a similar way to Rogue Trader, and in certain areas it certainly is, but in others it's quite different. Let's take it one step at a time. The alpha takes place in what I believe might be the beginning of Chapter 1 of the game, I say might because a lot of things can change before the final release, including what we're doing in this early version. At the very beginning of a new run, we're asked to choose between two scenarios. In one, we retrieved an artifact but sacrificed the life of our mentor, a fully ranked Inquisitor. In the other, we failed to retrieve it but saved our superior's life. In both scenarios, we faced trial, but in the first case, we immediately delve into the Underhive, while in the second, it's implied we first visited the Hive Spires. I believe this mentor choice is the one we'll make in the game's prologue, once the game is fully released. And then we'll have the option to start our investigations, either in the Spires or in the Underhive. But again, anything can change. The option we choose introduces some changes to the scenario we're going to play, like our starting level, either 3 or 5 if we've already been to the Spires, the state of the locations we explore in the Underhive, which has been ravaged by what I can only describe as unusually brutal and destructive ocean tides, and the reaction of some NPCs we encounter. Every scenario in the alpha was supposed to include about 10 hours of gameplay. The first one took me 20, tried to uncover everything and really solve the cases at hand, but I'm notoriously slow because I read and check everything in every game. In this alpha, you cannot create your character. You're issued a placeholder acolyte who is an officer, and the game difficulty can only be set to normal or daring, with the option to customize it further. I clarified this because I've heard people lamenting the lack of character creation, but I suppose the focus of this alpha build is to test a small chunk of the game with its core mechanics and to report bugs, not much else. It's more of a vertical slice of the game than a fulfilling experience. As soon as you open the character sheet, you're going to notice it's quite similar to Rogue Traders, but with some essential differences. All defensive stats have been condensed into armor and defense. Armor has its own hit points, since it's going to be depleted in combat, and defense mostly depends on character agility. I'm not sure yet how defense comes into play when an enemy tries to hit you, since it's not explained for now. Another new entry is the influence stat, which is typically set to 2 and indicates how many squares away on the battlefield certain abilities will have an effect. You'll also immediately notice that while the characteristics are the same as in Rogue Trader, the skill system has been reworked, with some new skills replacing the older ones. For example, skills like Arouse seems to have been split into Tenacity and Resistance, and new ones like Wits, Interrogation and Intimidation have been added, since they're closer to the tabletop version of the game and more relevant to our role as Inquisition investigators. Convictions have not been implemented yet. We know that the radical and Puritan convictions will be present, but not much more than that. We see the representation of those two convictions in action, though, in the characters of Sister Septima and Inquisitor Millicentilia. Talking about the squad at our disposal, in both scenarios we're issued the same specialists. Haymar, the jungle Katachan fighter, Ipioni, a trained chirurgeon who's also a soldier and effectively a combat medic, and Saro, a sanctioned pyromancer. The second scenario also gives you 2 mercenaries. During gameplay, we have the option to recruit 3 additional companions, 2 of which I've already made presentation videos about. Cog, the Ogrin Bonehead from the Scintillan Fusiliers, Rakti, the Krut Outcast, and Larthir, an Eldari Wayseeker with his own personal motives for aiding the Inquisition. Companions have their own quests and backstories to uncover, which are only partially shown in this limited segment of the game, and I won't spoil them for you. To be frank, the most interesting companions to me so far are Cog and Rakti. How could you not love a war machine who loves shiny buttons and an alien ranger outcast with a pet bird? The Eldari companion has a short quest as well, but it didn't appeal much to me. For now, he's the usual arrogant, mysterious and emo Eldari we expect every member of this Xenos race to be. At least he doesn't call us monkey all the time, just a small creature. Rakti is another sniper like Irliat in Rogue Trader, but her being a Krut gives it a very strange spin, especially when she compliments you by saying you're a worthy hunter and that she'll eat you when you die to preserve your strength. Welcome to Warhammer, baby. Besides their role-playing features, every companion has a combat role to fulfill. I'm sure we'll be able to further customize them, possibly building them in broken ways and assigning them completely different roles from the ones they're meant to have. But in the scenarios I played, you have very limited levels to play around with, and it's difficult to completely deviate from the intended paths. Cog is the frontliner, very tanky and equipped with both melee and medium-ranged options, though melee is where he excels. He occupies 4 squares on the battlefield since he's big, but navigates it much better than Ulfar, rarely getting stuck or blocked in narrow passages. Rakti, as mentioned, is an operative sniper, and with the combat overall I'll talk about momentarily, she has a few options to apply exploits, using them to deal more damage or to wreck enemies' armor. Generally speaking, the operative still feels a little weak. Some good perks she has come from her crude origin. Larthir has great mobility and is a bit of everything. Part melee fighter, part psyker, part buffer. He has a unique Eldari origin as a way seeker. A psyker which is a buffer and uses morale instead of veil degradation to scale his powers. And he's best used in melee, dual wielding swords, and using melee precise attacks. Because melee precise attacks are a thing now. Epion, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name multiple times here. I searched the name and I couldn't find a precise English pronunciation for it, despite it being an ancient Greek mythology character, is a healer and a buffer, and being a soldier she can deal useful damage over time with a flamer or other weapons. She starts with a shotgun too, but shotguns feel weak now compared to Rogue Trader, with an increased cost for attacking and not having the knockback anymore. She also has great mobility and can run from one companion to another during a single turn, applying different healing or buff effects. Haymar is supposed to be versatile, switching between his heavy stabber, knife and grenades, but I mostly played him as a heavy gunner. The talent he has for infinite grenades doesn't seem to be working, just like rapid fire, which also doesn't seem to work as intended. Burst attacks are essentially single target attacks now, with only the occasional stray shot wandering away from the intended target. If you have enemies within the area of a burst attack and target one on the back line, the ones in the front are not hit, which is both counterintuitive and a terrible nerf for these types of weapons. I'm not sure if this is intended, since burst attacks were overpowered in Rogue Trader and maybe they tried to rebalance them, but now they're quite weak compared to single-shot attacks from sniper rifles or similar weapons. Saro is a pyromancer with a bit of telekinesis, and as always with psychers, is very useful. He provides great AoE damage over time, debuffs, and even defensive buffs if you invest more into the telekinesis route. He's a mystic, the new archetype dedicated to psychers, who are no longer just an origin. Contrary to Larthir, who has a psyker origin but took a melee archetype, Saro is the pure psyker. Speaking of leveling, as mentioned before, it's very limited in the alpha, so we don't yet have a full overview of how it works in Dark Heresy. Abilities and talents may share names with some from Rogue Trader, but everything has been reworked, so don't fall into the trap of thinking the mechanics are the same. Abilities and talents are no longer all thrown at you at once, reducing the overwhelming effect Rogue Trader had at the beginning. They're now divided into sets, and you can filter them by type or source. The UI is much clearer, and I really like the grouping by source filter because it's easy to understand which facet of a character allows you to select a specific option. It feels much more organized to me. Another great improvement is the leveling projection chart, which returns from Alcat's Pathfinder games. Now we know at which levels we gain new abilities, talents, modifications, upgrades, attribute increases, specializations, and more. This will make planning builds much easier. The leveling structure also feels far more streamlined compared to Rogue Trader. Everything is now divided into categories, and it's already much easier to understand. In addition to abilities, talents, and stat increases, we now have specializations, upgrades, and modifications. Entering a specialization grants characteristic and skill increases, as well as access to new talents and modifications. An upgrade allows you to add new effects to an ability you already have, while a modification is a bonus you can apply at any time outside of combat to eligible abilities. Archetypes and new features are not implemented in the alpha yet, and I imagine they relate to character creation and the choice of your second-tier archetype. Combat is the third major change Dark Heresy introduces compared to Rogue Trader. It's similar but also quite different. With the changes introduced is more tactical, more XCOM-like, and I think more approachable in general. The first big difference is that both you and enemies now have armor, represented by an additional silver bar on top of health. Generally, you need to break armor before damaging health, but there are exceptions, such as weapons that deal more damage to armor, like meltaguns, or weapons that completely bypass it, like knives. Some abilities also allow you to play around this system. As long as a character has armor, they're protected from vital damage, which I'm going to mention shortly. This approach is similar to Divinity Original Sin 2's armor system. While it adds variety to how you approach combat and react to different enemy types, it also makes every combatant feel very beefy, resulting in longer fights. To counter this, Dark Heresy reworked the momentum system from Rogue Trader into a morale system. Every actor on the battlefield, from your party members to enemies, has a morale indicator. When it reaches 10, that character becomes heroic, unlocking special abilities similar to heroic acts in Rogue Trader. When morale reaches -10, characters become broken and may act unpredictably. The morale value for every single character is indicated by a blue or red shield next to their armor and health bars when in a fight. Your party gains access to desperate measures at -10 morale, which are powerful abilities that come with a permanent malus until the end of combat. There is also a better way to end combat besides killing everyone, which is by demoralizing enemies. You have a morale superiority indicator on the top of the screen, near the initiative queue. If you destroy the morale of enough opponents, pushing the indicator to 100%, they break and you can choose to win the fight even if you haven't killed everyone. They'll flee the battlefield and leave their loot behind. I'm not entirely sure about the specifics on how to finally increase and decrease the morale yet, since the Codex, the Archivium Serpentis, isn't implemented. But this mechanic is completely king in the alpha. It adds a new layer of battlefield manipulation which is incredibly powerful, especially for characters that specialize in morale manipulation, like officers and psychers. If officers were OP in Rogue Trader, throwing additional turns around, now they are OP in this new morale manipulation system, which seems to be the universal key to victory. Veil degradation is still present, and Psychers now have abilities to consciously increase or decrease it. At higher values, their abilities are much more powerful, but bad things can happen with the perils of the warp returning from Rogue Trader. The specifics of the perils are a little blurry at the moment. Another difference from Rogue Trader is what is called vital damage. This type of damage causes critical conditions that apply maluses, and are removed on our characters with medkit use. They're not the injuries you collect in Rogue Trader when a character falls on the battlefield. You're protected from them as long as your armor holds, but precision shots and certain weapons can bypass that protection. Once the armor is gone, you have a chance to get vitals damage when your health is damaged, and this works both on party members and enemies. With precision shots, you can choose which body part to target, each with different effects. Imagine the first two Fallout cold shots for comparison. Every body part hit adds some malus to your enemy or increases damage for your attack. So far, one of the most useful options I've found is targeting the arms, since it breaks concentration. Because enemies now have concentration abilities, which are special attacks charged over a full turn. Different types of attacks can break concentration, like a precision shot to the arms, some area or psychic attacks, and so on. Action points and movement points are back, of course, and Nulcat has found a clever way to reduce the constant buff and debuff activation that made Rogue Trader feel like a clickfest. Many of these effects are now toggles you can activate or deactivate, rather than abilities you must click every turn. For example, Run and Gun is now a toggle that allows a character to fire twice with a burst or area attack, at the cost of reduced damage and an extra action point per attack. It's mutually exclusive with Rapid Fire, which doubles rate of fire but spreads hits randomly within the burst cone, also increasing action point cost. There are many such toggles now, and they significantly speed up combat while removing much of Rogue Trader's clickfest nature. Equipment is similar to Rogue Trader with the same slots, but weapons and armor now have more modifiers, trying to give them unique identities. For example, lace guns deal additional damage to armor, melting a tank in the front line, or daggers have the armor-piercing property that ignores the enemy armor and damages their health directly. Some of these properties existed in Rogue Trader too, but here they are more numerous and have significant impact on tactics. Another thing I noticed is the presence of many secondary objectives during combat. Enemies may attempt to execute prisoners, seal doors, or activate devices that affect morale. You need to interrupt these actions, adding more tactical layers to each encounter. The economic system has also changed. Unlike in Rogue Trader, where you dealt with immense wealth and profit factor, Dark Heresy uses a more traditional currency system, with loot you sell for money. This fits the theme, since you're not a high-ranking Imperial noble, but a relatively low-ranking Inquisition operative. The local currency is synths, at least that's how I believe it's pronounced, since we're on the planet Scintilla. And you'll spend them on consumables, better equipment, and key items like ropes, fuses, or drugs. These items can unlock new zones or be used in dialogue to influence NPCs. Factions return as well, with a twofold reputation system. You can increase presence through deeds that inspire respect or fear, or build rapport through amicable actions. Vendors still lock equipment behind the reputation thresholds, and to reach the better items it seems you need to commit to being either scary or friendly, since the two reputation types don't add up. Maps now have more verticality, with ladders and climbable points clearly highlighted. Environmental interaction is present as well, like shooting pipes to create makeshift bridges. Before wrapping up, I want to say a few words about visuals and sound. Despite being an alpha, there are already noticeable improvements in map detail and animation quality. Areas are immersive and filled with gruesome details that aren't just flavor, but can also serve as investigation clues. Character models are more detailed, animations are improved, and cutscenes are higher quality, continuing the direction started with Lex Imperialis in Rogue Trader. I also really like that one of your servo skulls acts as a flashlight in dark areas. It automatically lights your path, and when stationary you can direct it with the mouse, interacting with the environment in certain occasions. The music, while limited in tracks for now, is very ominous and carries the gothic tone expected from a Warhammer 40k game. Environmental sounds further enhance the eerie atmosphere, in the creepy way, of course. Voice acting is not present in the alpha, but the game should be fully voiced in the final release. But you can hear the common rabble around talking in low gothic, which is a nice touch that enhances the immersion. This sums up my first impressions of Dark Heresy. It's undoubtedly a game with a lot of potential. The only aspect that worries me is the constant backtracking in large areas, which might not sit well with certain players. Everything else feels like a step up from Rogue Trader, maintaining strong tactical depth while streamlining many older systems. I plan to do more runs, testing some things and possibly uncovering new details, since they're updating the alpha on a regular basis. I also want to make more beginner-friendly lore videos about the places and characters we encounter in Dark Heresy, now that I have more information and footage. I also have some retrospectives and reviews on older RPGs in the works, but those take time, so they won't be ready anytime soon. If you want to support Allcat Games, remember that the alpha is available to anyone who buys the Developer Digital Pack or the Collector's Edition. If you're interested in the final product, wishlisting the game on Steam helps give it visibility. We don't have a release date yet, but based on Allcat's previous roadmaps, an educated guess would be a beta version in about 6 months and a full release in December 2026. Again, this is just speculation, and a lot can change, so don't take it as gospel. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you want to delve deeper into Dark Heresy, activate the purity seals below and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.